today. And as we all know that this is a very urgent and a crucial financing opportunity for Pakistan, keeping in mind the dire need for innovative financing in Pakistan. So, I would say before we begin the session officially, I would share some housekeeping rules for effective session. So, this session is recorded, and this session is live streamed on our social media channels. That includes Twitter, so LinkedIn, and uh, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Also, we would encourage questions from our audience. And if whatever questions you have, you can write them in the Q&A box, and we will address them at the end of the session in our particular session on question answers. And then before formally beginning the discussion, I would request Dr. Khalid Walid for his opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid is a research fellow at STPI. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Zainab. Zainab, I hope I am audible.
No, your voice is a bit low.
Okay, just let me change.
Okay, how about this? How about
Sure.
now? Am I audible?
Yes, it's better.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this very important, very innovative sort of thing where Pakistan is aiming for diversifying its capital market options, particularly in terms of bond market, where traditionally Pakistan has invested in euro bonds. We have been very interested in the Western markets, bond markets, keeping the Pakistan's financial crunch. And these bond markets, they provide sort of a medium to long-term support for Pakistan. Uh, but this time around, what we are uh, doing or experimenting with is the diversification of these capital market options. And we are exploring Panda bonds. Obviously, we have this strategic relationship with China. And now the world is sort of transforming the relationship, international relations. They are transforming from geostrategic to geoeconomics. I think these sort of relationships that will further strengthen I would say, strategic nature of partnership between countries. So what we need to do is we need to explore diversification. We need to explore how to get more innovative with capital markets. Secondly, I guess that is very important, how to recycle the revenue financing that we receive from these options. We have seen that China has provided a very paramount, essential, I would say, life support for Pakistan in terms of China-Pakistan economic corridor and the financial investments associated with it. But that was the first phase of it. Now, in the second phase, because we didn't recycle the finances, we didn't plan for the long term. Now we are facing turmoil, particularly in terms of financial crunch, that now we have to repay to the Chinese investors. So we need to sort of plan it in a way that it sort of diversify the risk, particularly the currency risk, currency hedging risk, because whenever that happens in Pakistan, if I give you the example of energy sector, power sector, you will see that uh, Pakistan started, uh, if I give you example of fixed payments or capacity payment charges, those were around three rupee per unit in the start beginning of the projects. But now it has increased to around 14 to 15 rupee per unit, particularly for the Chinese power plants. So what happened here is these financial indicators, macroeconomic indicators, they sort of deteriorated. And because of this deterioration, uh, we sort of having this financial crunch. So having diversified options, diversification at capital market, this will give us uh, liberty so that we invest in yuan dominated denominated bonds so that these risks are diversified, the risks are mitigated. Secondly, the second option is how again to use these panda bonds not just for the financial crunch, economic crisis, but in a sustainable way that lure investments into Pakistan's renewable energy sector, just like we saw in the Egypt's case, just like the Hungary is sort of financing the BRI projects through these Panda bonds. So we need to sort of think about it, how to make it conducive, for the financial architecture so that we can learn more around Chinese ecosystem or Chinese financial architecture. What happened with Pakistan and China, that we developed this infrastructural relationship under this strategic partnership, but we couldn't transform this structural relationship to a financial one, where the capital markets of Pakistan and China, they are coordinating, they are sort of communicating with each other so that there are more investments in capital markets and more instruments like Panda bonds. They sort of get mainstreamed in Pakistan. So policymakers, this is the right time that we start to explore. Right now, it is a very not a huge or significant amount, but still having options is very good thing uh, at policy arena. But at Pakistan's end, what we need to do is we need to again have this holistic sort of thing where ministries, they are planning it together, integrated planning. For example, Ministry of Finance should start, State Bank should be part of it, maybe SSCP and the Ministry of Climate Change, Ministry of Commerce, they should join hand, and then we can sort of think how to recycle the revenues that can be sort of harnessed from these instruments, and then we can think about it how we can use these revenues to foster more sustainable investments to Pakistan. Uh, my take would be the experts can discuss how to sort of make panda bonds from panda bonds to sustainable panda bonds, particularly for the developing countries, particularly countries like Pakistan, where there is a multiple crisis like economy, energy, environment. And lastly, China has come up with a new banking policy, and that is the new implementation plan for the green finance to attract high quality green finance. So we need to sort of again discuss this. What is the high quality green finance and how these green bond instruments or panda bond instruments, they can be better integrated with this ecosystem. So just as an opening thought, experts can delve into it. My take would be how to align Pakistani financial architecture with Chinese architecture, particularly keeping the capital markets in focus, how to connect the capital markets, and how to lure finance or recycle the finance generated through Panda bonds to sustainable sector, to renewable energy sector. Because in Pakistan, because Chinese assets, particularly the coal power plants, they have become stranded assets. So we need to sort of focus how to reorient investments from one part of the economy to the other part of it. So maybe Panda bonds that can provide this leverage. Lastly, maybe Pakistan can think about retiring some of the loan, particularly in power sector, through the Panda bonds as well. So there is another policy avenue that can be debated and that can be discussed. What would be the long-term implications? How renewables they can be financed through this instrument, and how maybe early retirement of fossil fuel-based power plants that can be sort of financed through these instruments as well. Maybe debt can be converted to sovereign debt or other sort of thing. But still, there are many options that policymakers can think about it. But still, I would again recommend that the policies should be made in integrated way, not in a silos way. Like Ministry of Finance would be thinking, but purely on financial terms. Maybe if you add Ministry of Power or Ministry of Climate Change to this debate, they will add some sustainable component to this debate as well. So looking forward to a very insightful, solution-oriented discussion today. Hopefully, Pakistan will broaden, expand this Panda bond portfolio of Pakistan, and we can sort of recycle and reorient these financing towards the renewable side as well. So looking forward to it. Back to you, Zan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid. You're very rightly mentioned that Panda Bonds provides an excellent opportunity to diversify the funding sources and mitigate some exchange rate currency risks, and managing the debt for countries like Pakistan that are experiencing debt distress. So, before going further into the discussions, I would like to share a brief presentation about what Panda Bonds are. So, as we all are aware that also I would like to request our speakers if they can switch on their videos if their internet connection allows them to. Is my screen visible?
Screen is visible.
So, Panda bonds, as we all are aware that we are all aware of the growing importance of the green finance globally. Different countries are using different financing instruments to fund their renewable energy investments. And in that context, Panda bonds provides an excellent opportunity for Pakistan to tap into China's vast domestic bond market and use this locally currency denominated bonds to reduce exposure to exchange rate risks. As we further delve into the details that how Panda bonds could serve into the model for financing Pakistan's renewable energy future. But before that, we need to discuss that what Panda bonds are. So Panda bonds are basically Chinese currency, yuan or renminbi denominated bonds issued by overseas entities in China's interbank bond market. This is Panda bonds basically is a kind of financial instrument or tool that provides access to the Chinese capital market where you can raise capital on low exchange rate and low interest rate. Secondly, in recent years, what we have observed is that the China's financial market has experienced a notable internationalization. And why this internationalization has been achieved is because the Panda bonds proceeds can be used overseas, and the cost advantage of this over onshore financing is increasing. And these Panda bonds have hit a high value of 800 billion RMB in 2025 where 1,100 institutions from more than 70 countries and regions had invested in China's interbank bond market, with foreign capital holding totaling around 4.4 RMB trillion by the end of September 2025. The Panda bond market continues to attract top international issuers and investors and serves as an important gateway and symbol of opening China's financial market to the world. So in this context, we have different types of bonds. The overseas entities can choose different types of bonds to issue according to their specific business characteristics, and the Panda bonds are the dominant for foreign entities issuance in the interbank bond market. The different types of Panda bonds that we have are RMB bonds, which are issued by the International Development Institution and the foreign government agency. Then we have a category of financial institution bond that is basically issued by financial institution. And we have a debt financing instrument, which is very significant in case of debt distressed countries or developing countries or emerging economies in global south. That is basically issued by the non-financial enterprises. And then we have the corporate bond that is issued by non-financial enterprises. These are the generic forms of Panda bonds, but in the recent years, China, in its efforts to implement the 14th Year Development Plan and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, has launched the Panda bonds with sustainable themes. These endeavors are aimed at establishing a good social image and improving ESG performance of China's capital markets and attracting domestic and foreign investors who focus on sustainable development to invest in China's bond market. The sustainability themed bonds include four subcategories that includes a green bond, a social bond, a sustainability bond, and a sustainability linked bond. Who can issue these bonds are overseas non-financial enterprises, foreign government agencies, and international development institutions. So what are the requirements for these sustainable bonds is that they need to have four core elements. Firstly is that how the proceeds of these bonds will be used will tell the type of category of the bond. Secondly, the project evaluation and selection in which these bonds are going to be invested. Then the management of the proceeds and the information disclosure of these bonds. An issuer can establish its framework for social bond or a sustainability bond based on the above four elements that we discussed and state that the envisaged bonds are consistent with the four core elements. An issuer who does not have a framework shall state in the prospectus for each bond issuance whether it meets the core elements or not. Or similarly, the bonds that will be used for debt financing that meets the criteria of social bonds or sustainability bonds are eligible to be labeled as social or sustainable debt financing instruments. So we have discussed that Panda bonds are emerging in the global financial landscape. One of the main reasons that these bonds are emerging is that there is a cost advantage for investing in Panda bonds. The financial cost, if you see the graph, you can see that in 2024, they showed the lowest average interest rate of 2.7. So the financing cost in China's own onshore market has continued to decline in the recent years in contrast to the rate hike in other overseas markets like the Eurobond or the US market. The lower costs in China's domestic bond market have encouraged more foreign entities to issue panda bonds as the cost savings can be significant through these bonds. So, if we observe what are the benefits that China have in issuing panda bonds and the global South and the other developing economies, it's kind of what we can say that it's kind of a win-win situation for both China and the developing countries. For developing countries, the benefit is that it provides an alternate funding source for global South and the host countries where these bonds are issued. Secondly, the increased liquidity in the secondary market. As we know that the liquidity of Panda bonds has improved significantly, with monthly trading volume rising from approximately RMB 30 billion in 2023 to over 50 billion in 2024. Thirdly, Panda bonds is an excellent source for diversification of financing, and it also diversifies the currency of the host countries. It increases by increasing the share of RMB denominated Panda bonds. It helps host countries diversify the currencies of their liabilities, enhancing their resilience against economic fluctuations. It also differs economic policies and development trends among creditor nations. Now, earlier we have talked about the benefits for the issued host countries. Now, what are the benefits for China? So the China government support Panda bonds. In recent years, the Chinese government has actively promoted the development of Panda bond market by improving regulatory frameworks, facilitating the two-way opening of financial markets. Similarly, the launch of Swap Connect in 2023 helps foreign investors hedge interest rate risks, further opening China's bond market. The main advantage that China have in Panda bonds is that it advances RMB internationalization and the opening of China's bond market. Secondly, it expands the presence of RMB-denominated financial assets, integrating China's further into the global markets. Thirdly, it mobilizes the private capital for development. And lastly, it enhances China's overseas investment strategy. Now come to the most relevant case for us, that is why it is beneficial for Pakistan. For Pakistan, as Pakistan is in a dire need, Pakistan has ambitious development goals and it's in a burgeoning need of investment. Panda bonds can leverage this opportunity for financing the development of sustainable projects or RE infrastructure. Last year, in March 2024, the government of Pakistan announced the issuance of Panda bonds of worth $300 million in the upcoming fiscal year. This policy development resonates strongly with the Pakistan government's vision of economic revival and sustainable development. The potential benefits that Pakistan can yield from issuance of Panda bonds is that Pakistan can improve its creditworthiness in the global financial landscape. Secondly, we can get the high liquidity of secondary market. And thirdly, we can have diversification of financing for sustainable development. I would like to stop here and open the floor for discussion. And the points that we are mainly be discussing is what is the role of Panda bond in development finance, and the role of China's increased participation in overseas markets and how it impacts global development finance, and the growth of Panda bonds market, and what further steps can be taken to attract more foreign investors, and how Panda bonds could serve as a model for financing Pakistan's renewable energy projects and climate resilience initiatives. With this, I'll stop here and we'll move towards our panel discussion. We have been joined by very esteemed experts in our panel. Firstly, I'll go towards our Dr. Christoph Nedefel. Dr. Christoph is the Director of Griffith Asia Institute. He has been working extensively on green finance. So, Dr. Christoph, in your experience, how do you see that the increasing issuance of Panda bonds provide diversification benefits for developing countries in terms of green financing? And how Panda bonds can be integrated into a debt structuring plan for countries like Pakistan? And how do you see the role of China's creditor banks in negotiating or providing these sorts of bonds? So over to you, Dr. Christoph.
Thank you so much, and what a pleasure to be here. And a really great presentation, Sanab. I really enjoyed it. A lot of great research and kind of collection of relevant information. So congratulations for that. Really, really relevant. Yeah, interesting. I was just yesterday at a meeting with the central bank and Majun, who are both in Australia, and we're also discussing the potential of Panda bonds. And of course, the PBOC, the central bank, and Majun were very much promoting the opportunities for emerging markets to utilize Panda bonds, and particularly green Panda bonds, as a way of particularly low cost financing. And you pointed it out that at this time the spread of the interest rate on the Panda bonds is much lower than in the Euro bond or US dollar market. So that there's a general, a good financing opportunity at a lower cost. Now, kind of looking at various cases that have existed of countries, and particularly also sovereigns, using Panda bonds. I was also last year at the Hungarian Central Bank. They organized very interesting meetings, and was a very interesting discussion on renminbi internationalization, and Panda bonds is, as you mentioned, one of the forms of renminbi internationalization. And so Hungary issued two Panda bonds over the last years, or utilized the Panda bond market to raise capital. Now, I think from what I gather, it was a successful bond issuance overall, and so I think there was a lot of support also from the Chinese side. But overall, it seems that the preferred mode of financing remains at this point the international capital markets, not the Panda bond markets, for two reasons. Number one is currently the transaction cost of issuing Panda bonds is still very high. And this is kind of that two forms of transaction cost. Number one is actually kind of getting all of the materials ready. And bond issuance is not something that is particularly with high volumes. It's not something easy, and kind of finding kind of the right language, finding the right documents, and kind of just doing the administration of in a bond issuance is quite extensive. And so doing this on the Panda bond markets without any experience just takes a lot longer than doing it on the international capital markets. Now, the Chinese are, of course, trying to simplify the processes, streamline the processes, support in the processes. But overall, of course, the experiences in the international capital markets from the issuer side are often much more mature, and therefore kind of the transaction costs on this side are lower. The second transaction cost is, of course, usually the proceeds of the bonds are not going to be used in renminbi. The use of the proceeds are often used in hard currency, that is dollar or euro, which is much more fungible. So that means that the proceeds from the bond have to be transferred, kind of have to be exchanged into a hard currency, and then paid back again in renminbi. So there's an extra currency exchange risk all the time that needs to be factored in. And of course, I mean, also, and that's the same, by the way, no matter kind of whether you kind of use the Panda bonds to pay the Chinese in renminbi or not, kind of to invest kind of in Chinese imports, the revenues that any of the issuer, particularly also the Pakistani government and similarly the Hungarian government makes, is in local currency. So there will always be a currency risk. Now, kind of for the Hungarian side, that's a totally different aspect, because it's much more close to the forint, the Hungarian forint. It's much more closely pegged to the euro, whereas I think for the Pakistani rupee, there's a currency risk no matter which kind of issuance you have. So whether you have a euro, US dollar, or renminbi bond, there will always be currency risk. So it's kind of just a question how to manage what's the capacity about managing these risks in order to minimize any currency risks, which I know kind of also, of course, hurt Pakistan's economy and debt positions during COVID when the rupee was not as strong. So I think these are just some considerations that are, I think, important, and I'm happy also to kind of dive deeper into and into your other questions. But you remind me the other questions were quite complex as well. But maybe you also want to invite the other participants, the other panelists that are much smarter than me to provide some input.
Sure, we'll come to you with their second question as well. I just wanted to know, how do you think the China's creditor banks can, come with Panda bonds negotiating terms? How can they facilitate Pakistan issuing these bonds?
Now, of course, any financial institution kind of that wants to support and underwrite or be a financial advisor in the issuance of these financial instruments because they make money from it. And so um, having a strong Chinese bank that has experience in issuance Panda bonds um, can address some of the concerns that I kind of mentioned about the transaction cost, about getting all the documents potentially even in Chinese ready. So if there's a strong Chinese financial institution that wants to support it, of course, against the fee, that would be helpful. And I think kind of this is exactly also the support structures that China is aiming to provide in order to kind of make the issuance of Panda bonds more attractive.
Thank you, Dr. Christoph, for your valuable inputs. I agree with you that there are definitely certain currency risks that need to be mitigated when you're basically preparing for Panda bonds. With this, I'll move towards with our next panelist for today. That is Mr. Hamid Sharif. Mr. Hamid Sharif is the former managing director of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So as we know that for countries like Pakistan, when we are going to issue Panda bonds, we need to have some guarantors, and that guarantee needs to come from the institutions like AIIB. So your inputs are very valuable in this context, and I would like to know, sir, from you that how do these credit enhancement, like guarantees from or developed countries or international institutions, improve the credit worthiness of Panda bonds overall? And what role can institutions like IMF, ADB, or World Bank play in facilitating these credit enhancements? So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Zainab. Again, thanks for a great presentation. And I really enjoyed the comments from Christoph as well. I think on the currency risks, which I think are quite often underestimated. Just to give you an example of that, when I was with the Asian Development Bank, we came up with multi-currency loans, which could be offered. So we could offer loans in dollars or the Japanese yen, which was, in one sense, very attractive because just like with China now, the yen interest rates were extremely low. But a lot of countries didn't opt for those because they weren't sure of which way the currency risk would go. And they didn't necessarily have many exports to Japan. So then they would have a secondary currency risk because they would have to use their dollars to probably buy the yen. So I think that point which Christoph made, I really want to emphasize is something which you really need to have capacity to manage. Now, to turn to your question on credit enhancement, MDBs like World Bank, ADB, AIB, etc., one of their jobs is to maximize their balance sheet. And one of the criticisms of the MDBs has been that they haven't used enough of their balance sheet, particularly through use of guarantees. So there's a lot of pressure on the MDBs to use guarantees, and they're actually very willing to, and they're very keen to. But it's often the lack of transactions, which aren't there. Borrowers generally tend to think of just getting loans and not guarantee enhancements. They can offer two sorts of guarantees. They can offer a partial risk guarantee, so to cover political risk and so on, which wouldn't be relevant here. Here, when you're going to issue in China, What the Chinese buyers of those bonds will be concerned about is the credit rating of the issuer. And of course, with Pakistan, given its not so great credit rating currently, and if some of the corporates who were to issue, they would also be affected by Pakistan's sovereign rating, even though they may themselves may be very good. So they will need credit enhancement, and that credit enhancement is available. A precedent for that is the issue by Egypt in 2022/2023. Egypt issued 500 million Panda bond, and AIIB, in fact, provided the necessary credit enhancement for that. And again, the rate which they got was very good, about 3.11%. I'll stop here on the credit enhancement. Okay.
Great, right? I believe last year when our finance minister discussed that we're going to issue Panda bonds, he also discussed that Pakistan aims to follow the Egyptian model. So we're looking forward to it, that how government takes this opportunity. So I'm definitely going to come towards you in the second round of questions. Now I'll move towards our next panelist, that is Mr. Hassan Daud Butt. Mr. Hassan Daud is the senior advisor, Energy China, and former project director, CPAC, Ministry of Planning Development and Special Initiative. Dr. Hassan, my question to you is that given the significant increase in Panda bonds issuance, how do you see this contributing to the global adoption of RMB? And what challenges do you foresee in the issuance of Panda bonds in the emerging markets like Pakistan, especially in relation to the currency risk that we discussed earlier and the foreign exchange regulations in Pakistan? Over to you, Dr. Hassan. Dr. Hassan, are you with us? Okay, I believe there is some internet connectivity issue. We'll come to Dr. Hassan later. Let's move to our next panelist. That is Ms. Hongyu. Ms. Hongyu has joined us from Renovation Hub. Thank you, Ms. Hongyu, for joining us. You have been working a lot on green financing, and it's great to have you today. From your experience and insights, I would like to know that what is the
I'm available.
current appetite?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
there was
yeah,
some
I
issue.
can hear you.
Should I answer your question, or should I let our colleague from China reply?
You can go ahead. Ms. Hongyu, I'll come to words after you.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you very much. And I think it's very timely initiative by SDPI, and having my colleagues like Christoph and Hamid Sharif Saab, sir, Assalamu alaikum, and some of the other people who've actually worked with China and can explain the challenges. But for me, I think three things are very important. A, for us in the finance department, because I have worked with finance department and I understand the challenges of taking an initiative in public sector. In public sector, taking initiatives in itself is a big challenge. And then, of course, the timing of it and the narrative and the marketing of such bonds. These are some things in which we have always had challenge in the Chinese market. We have had challenge in CPAC for, business to business engagements vis-a-vis the special economic zone. We've had challenges around the energy sector, and the narrative that is being built around the credit rating and some of the activities that have just happened yesterday also. So the environment is not so conducive. So how can we leverage this? I think first of all we need to really understand that this in itself, and based on what you said, and of course some of my other colleagues said, I think it's an extremely valuable financing tool for Pakistan, and for a country which in a boom and bust cycle remains under immense challenge of debt repayment and of course debt recycling also. And I'm very happy to report that recently China has recycled its debt for another $2 billion for another 2 years. So we have the strategic relationship. So let's do a short, in my 2 minutes, let me do a short SWOT analysis for this. So strengths are naturally our strategic relationship. Of course, the China-Pakistan economic corridor, some of the Chinese financing institution like ICBC and also Pakistan-China Investment Company, under the platform of financing, Ministry of Finance working here. So these are, and of course, the strategic business to business CPEC phase 2 environment that we are talking about, and also the Joint Cooperation Committee meeting is scheduled in June. So perhaps this can be one of the deliverable points to discuss within that. The weakness is our policy articulation and our planning. Our planning, long-term planning remains a challenge. We take initiatives based on our myopic short-term decision-making ability. And of course, sometimes which comes in our mind because of the political economy, we have to make public statements around that also before even preparing for that. So I hope this time the preparation level is better. And that's not just a challenge with us. It has been a challenge with Egyptian and other developing countries. And in any country where we have this political economy and democracy, sometimes we make big slogans around things which are still in an infancy stage and plan. So I hope that is being done. I think for us, the way that the global financial markets are reacting, and you spoke about, and I think Khalid spoke about geoeconomics. I think geopolitics again is reshaping, and I think overwhelming geoeconomics. And every day is a new day nowadays, and people and the financial pundits are with their pen and paper every day, and they look at how the markets are behaving. So we will see this for another 6 months, I guess. So whether the timing, because for launching of any bonds, especially Panda bonds, especially in Chinese market, because in China sentiments matter like any other country, but naturally we have language and cultural issue. These sentiments are also important. So I think the currency volatility, which was spoken about, so I think for us it is extremely important that we do careful risk management and of course understand the transparent regulatory practices within China. This is not going to be easy, and it's going to be quite cumbersome because I mean, even the strategic relationship might develop that way, because the process remains for every country and for every institution to launch such bonds. And I think for Pakistan, linking Panda bond to CPEC would be, I think the way forward, one of the deliverables that we can set. But most importantly, and I think engaging people like Hamid Sharif Saab and financial institutions who have actually worked like Habib Bank and perhaps the ones that I've already mentioned. I think partnering with them, forming a consortium, working on financial intermediaries, I think that would be very, very critical. And I still believe that there's a long way to bridge that gap.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. You've rightly mentioned the strengths and what needs to be done to make these Panda bonds effective for Pakistan. I agree with you. Now I'll come towards our next panelist, that is Ms. Hongyu. Ms. Hongyu would like to know that what is the current appetite for Panda bonds among Chinese institutional investors, and what steps Pakistan can take in this regard to ensure that these bonds are seen as attractive and secure investments, not only by Pakistan's, but Chinese and international investors as well, to finance the renewable energy projects.
Thank you, Zainab, for the invitation. And hi, I'm Hongyu from Green Innovation Hub, a local environmental think tank based in Beijing. And really glad to join this really meaningful and important discussion. And our organization has been working on greening China's Belt and Road Initiative, including especially working on the green development under the CPEC framework, and how to mobilize finance to support Pakistan's green development, especially renewable energy, is one of the key focus. And as for the question, I think it's a two-part question. And from the first part, I think from the current market performance, we can observe that there's a strong appetite for Panda bonds among Chinese institutional investors, building on Zainab's initial statistics in the slides. For 2024, we can see that annual Panda bond market continues to grow and reach a record high, and it grows by 16% and reaching the or nearly 200 billion yuan, compared to 150 billion yuan in 2023. And in addition to the volume as well the number of the bond issuance as well as the scale, we can also see that there is an increasing share of overseas issuers as well as overseas investors participating in the panda bond market in China in last year. And also, we've seen that there are various players in addition to the sovereign nations. There are multi-direct banks, commercial banks, and multinational companies which already issued different kinds of panda bonds, and among which the sustainable related panda bonds are kind of in the ranked second among all the cumulative panda bond issuance. So we can see that in the China's panda bond market, there's a strong appetite for the issuance related with green sustainable development or sustainability linked loans. And I think this is also where the Pakistan could look to or to focus on when issuing the panda bond in China. And for example, in China, the panda bond, the sustainable linked, let me see, the sustainable panda bond ratio is the highest, and then the sustainability linked panda bond the second, and the green panda bond. And lastly is the carbon neutrality panda bonds. So, and also when we look at the use of proceeds, there are also focusing on renewable energy development, low carbon transportation, as well as air pollution control and other pollution control related measures. And I know that air pollution is also a challenge in Pakistan, and in China we have the experience in combating the air pollution as well as promoting the energy transition. So it has a synergy there. So these areas could be the area for use of proceeds. And the second part of the question, how to make it attractive both to Chinese investors and international ones. I think one of them is mentioned by the speaker from AIB, the credit enhancement mechanism, by working with the MDBs or obtaining guarantees from the multilateral development banks from AIB, which is already very active in facilitating the issuing of the panda bonds for other developing countries. And I also see that President Jin Liqun from AIB also made the speech about the bank plan to offer further guarantees or advice on such lending as it tried to foster the development of the panda bond market and encourage the funding for high quality projects in developing countries. And also when we also see that during the China-African high-level forum, Chinese President Xi Jinping also called on more African countries to issue panda bond in China's market. So I think there is opportunity for Pakistan to also use this bilateral framework, such as the CPEC, to also use to use this policy window and so as to foster the cooperation or the issuance of the panda bond. And lastly is the enhanced transparency and investor relations with robust disclosure practice, which maintains the high standards of transparency in the reporting and project disclosure to ensure the confidence of and attract the investors, and also to conduct regular investor engagement activities to promote the Pakistan plan for the panda bonds. Yeah, I will stop here for this first question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hongyu, for sharing the wonderful insights. And I believe China and Pakistan can definitely, as always, can collaborate better on this avenue of financing as well. With this, I'll move towards our next panelist for today. That is Mr. Iraj Hashmi. Mr. Iraj is the Director Debt from Ministry of Finance, Government of Pakistan. I believe Ministry of Finance is the key player in issuing panda bonds in Pakistan, and your inputs would be highly valuable. We would like to know from you is that how the government perceives this source of financing significant for Pakistan and how the government will be issuing these bonds? Is there any consideration of issuing these bonds in domain of sustainable, or how the government is taking this up? Over to you,
Hmm.
Mr. Irish.
Okay, thank you very much. Am I audible for everybody? Okay,
Yes, you're
perfect.
audible.
Thank you very much for the participation in this STEAM event, and it's always a learning curve to learn from the veterans in the industry who have been there and who have been around. We are very excited at Ministry of Finance for our first inaugural Panda bond issuance in Chinese markets. And the way we have planned it, it would be a sustainable bond. And we plan it to issue in this very calendar year because of the sustainability factor. Instead of issuing a regular plain vanilla euro bond, whenever it comes to a sustainability bond or sustainability linked bond, it's always like, some additional steps that has to be taken. We are in discussion with AIIB. Already we have engaged Chinese local credit agency, CCXI, in this. And we are expecting our credit rating to be issued somewhere around April from the Chinese credit rating agency. We have engaged Panda, which is a Chinese local legal counsel. We have engaged Pakistani legal counsel. So we are all prepared and equipped for the Panda bond issues, and we are actually looking forward to it. As far as the sustainability canvas goes, I am happy to share that in the last 1 year, uh, and the Ministry of Finance has made commendable progress. You would be seeing our first green sukuk launching through PSX in the next month. We are in the finalization stage of sustainability finance net financing net framework. Our secondary party opinion is pretty much expected in this week. And this third is the Panda bond issuance. So on the sustainability canvas, I think a commendable progress has been made by the Ministry of Finance, because we have realized that probably green financing and green debt security is the future for us. And just to encapsulate, because most of you have already talked about the different features of sustainability financing. One of the most important feature for us as Ministry of Finance, because as a borrower, is that the interest rate which is implied, or which is available for the Chinese Panda bond, is quite less as compared to the regular Euro bond issuance, whether it is for Pakistan or whether it's for Egypt. Like for instance, in the same year, Egypt issued a bond in the double digit, and in the same year, the Egypt issued a Panda bond in 3.5%. That is because of the credit enhancement. The credit spread goes a bit narrower, and the benchmark rate, because usually the benchmark rate is taken to be the U.S. Treasury, which is around 4.5%. In case of Chinese market, the CDB bond index is trading around 1.65 to 1.75. So because of credit enhancement, the credit spread gets narrower, and the benchmark spread is like as I can safely say is quarter to the benchmark rate which is available for the US Euro bond issuance. So in terms of cost factor, it's very beneficial, and end of the day, China happens to be the biggest trading partner of Pakistan. So a lot of import export and a lot of foreign currency requirement originates from China. So that is why these are the basic features that we are very excited for, and we plan to issue it in this calendar year. Um that's all from my end. If there is anything specific, I'll be more than happy to answer.
So much, Mr. Irish. You have very rightly shared the developments that are happening in Ministry of Finance regarding the Panda bonds. So it's great to hear, because these things are not as much available online to see, and it's very uh, happy to know about that, how that they're going to be launched soon, and government is looking in the domain of sustainability particularly. So it's a very positive signal globally that Pakistan is looking forward to meet its climate commitments through Panda bonds. Thank you so much for sharing the insights. With this, I'll come towards our second round of questions. In this round, I would also request our speakers to share two recommendations, or any one recommendation that you see is very significant for Pakistan for an effective implementation of Panda bonds, or effective can use these bonds to utilize the maximum potential out of it. from international best practices or their experience. And the particular question that I will come towards Dr. Christoph first. So, Dr. Christoph, I would like to know that we have already discussed that these bonds have low interest rates. We would like to know that how this impact the attractiveness of Panda bonds for foreign investors, keeping in mind that the interest rates are higher in Pakistan. So, I would also like to know that how can Pakistan leverage Panda bonds to attract sustainable finance and the key recommendations for the effective issuance of Panda bonds in Pakistan.
Oh, it's a very big question. I wish I would have kind of the easy answer. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is kind of also following up on the question that you had before, and I think also kind of the discussions that which has been fascinating so far. I think if this is not a one-off that Pakistan hopes to do to issue a Panda bond, use this, of course, as much as possible as a learning. So don't engage too much the external financial institutions to do all the work for you. Try to learn as much as possible, which might be painful and, of course, might be more costly. But kind of use this really kind of as training wheels. So it's going to be easier the next time. I think what's interesting in terms of international investors, and maybe Hongyu has better data. So I tried to talk to PBOC to get data. How many foreign investors are actually investing in the Chinese green bond market? So we know the overall share of the Chinese of the foreign investors in the Chinese bond market, which is very low. But there is no breakdown between green bonds or normal bonds. And I always kind of hammer onto the PBOC, give me the data. I want to know whether green bonds are indeed more attractive for foreign investors in China than not. So far, they have said, Christoph, there are 3 types of data. There is sensitive, there is important, and there's open data. And this is not open data. So I cannot tell you whether indeed green bonds are more attractive for foreign investors in China than not. Panda bonds, not very attractive to foreign investors, because why would they kind of expose themselves to even more risks? They don't want to have necessarily, they don't want to hold renminbi denominated debt. So I think kind of the Panda bonds tend to be more attractive for capital surplus of Chinese investors rather than international investors. That's at least kind of from the logic. But of course, in anything that is green, we know that, of course, the green bond markets or kind of green bond issuances are typically more oversubscribed than vanilla bonds with similar issuers. So there is, of course, has been, and let's see kind of with all of the world turbulence that we're seeing. So far, we kind of observed that the oversubscription of green bonds typically is higher than in vanilla bonds. So, but we don't know the correct kind of specific data for China.
Thank you so much. We would also like to search for this data, and if got something, we'll share with you as well. Okay. So with this, I'll move towards our next panelist, Mr. Hamid. Mr. Hamid, firstly, the recommendation for Pakistan for effective Panda bonds implementation or issuance, and secondly, I would like to know that the debt swap model using Panda bonds, creditor banks may need to forego part of the principal or interest. So how might these concessions affect the willingness of banks to participate in such schemes? And what are the potential benefits for the debtor countries and the creditor banks in the long run from this issuance of Panda bonds? What do you, sir?
Thank you. First, on the recommendation,
Yeah.
I think it's all to do with implementation. I think Pakistan struggles to implement projects. So if there's going to be a Panda band which makes promises about, green projects or reducing carbon or growing more trees, whatever it is, someone better make sure that it is actually done. Because without that, we will lose credibility. Because if you're issuing a green bond, it's not just about capacity to pay. It's all much more important is the capacity to deliver what you have promised in terms of use of bonds. So I think that for me would be the first, second, and the third recommendation. And Ministry of Finance, with all due respect, may not be the right agency. I mean, finance is great at arranging finance. That's his job. But the implementation is always with other ministries. And now, after the 18th Amendment, with the promises, and to what extent that alignment will take place, I think is going to determine the success of the green Panda bond in achieving its green objectives. You asked a question on debt swaps. I think debt swaps is not going to happen under Panda bonds. I think it's a concept which I think is much more relevant to Paris and to the traditional developed countries. The sort of debt swaps you've seen the one with Seychelles back in 2018, where basically the Paris Club debtors of Seychelles agreed to take a haircut with promises by Seychelles to then reinvest the savings back into marine environment, or it's green environment and so on. Similarly, when you seen with Ecuador, the debt swap which we saw in 2023, that happened basically because you had bondholders who had the choice to keep on holding those bonds and wishing to be paid, with a very unlikely scenario that they would be paid because Ecuador was not in a great financial position. So they agreed to take a haircut and settle for much higher credit worthy bonds, but of a much less value. And again, the DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, which is a US corporation, that was involved. And I think also maybe the Inter-American Development Bank also came in to provide credit enhancement. So, in a Panda bond, I don't see why Chinese institutions, financial institutions, should be willing to take a haircut of any sort for a green environment as such. I can see China being part of a group of countries, possibly, participating in a debt swap, but that would probably have to be orchestrated at a multilateral level. And I'm not aware that there's anything afoot on that. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. You've rightly
Can I
mentioned the points
quickly
about debt swap. I agree with that.
can I come in on debt swaps?
Yeah, sure.
So it's a very interesting observation. Of course, kind of we mentioned Egypt a couple of times before, and Egypt and China have signed an MOU on debt swaps. Now it's with CITCA, so the China International Development Corporation Agency, and not with Ministry of Finance or anything. But there is a lot of work going on helping raise awareness about the opportunities of debt swaps. And I'm myself involved also in some interesting projects in China on this topic. So I'm not giving up hope. And I know that there is, in some circles in the government, interest in kind of piloting it. And I believe that Pakistan is one of the countries where it would be actually very opportune to do it. Now, it's important to understand that the reason for, and simply kind of very important, similar to what you said about the bondholders that want to have a present value through the swap that is higher than the bond is traded. Now that is the same case, interestingly, for a lot of interest-bearing debt that Pakistan has from China. So the China Development Bank is all interest-bearing debt. And as we just heard, there's a 2-year holiday again. And so from a business model, from a present value, we just kind of did a haircut anyway. because of a 2-day debt holiday. So how can we actually restructure the debt in order for Pakistan to free up some of the resources to reduce the debt levels, not only the debt service, but the debt levels, and ideally also benefit Chinese, for example, developers through a debt for renewable swap. And there are very good models actually that kind of we have developed and also kind of others have developed to really think about how this is possible and attractive for the Chinese financial institutions, and of course also relevant and beneficial for Pakistan as a debtor country. So I'm not giving up hope on debt for nature swaps, or not debt for nature, debt for climate and debt for renewable swaps, because I think there is actually a lot of value that can be generated for both the financial institutions on the Chinese side as well as for Pakistan.
Thank you, Dr. Christoph. I strongly believe that if we come up with some kind of debt for climate and such swaps for Pakistan, that will be highly beneficial for Pakistan's financial health. So with this, I'll come towards our next panelist, Mr. Dr. Hassan Daud Butt. Sir, firstly, one recommendation regarding Panda bonds. And secondly, I would like to know, okay, what are the key advantages of private investors in China to participate in Panda bonds that are issued by developing countries like Pakistan? What do you?
Yeah, so let me just give you the recommendation. It cannot be one, it has to be three, because the areas in which this is working on. And if you look at the 2017 long-term plan for CPEC, it clearly articulated that there would be new financial instruments and, of course, models that would, because we understood that there would be issues around debt servicing. So new financial institutions and instruments and models would be discussed and would be perhaps worked on. So I think it took us 10 years to come to a stage where we're working on a. So therefore, what I would recommend is that we must link Panda bond, because we need to leverage our CPEC when I say it for selfish reasons. So we need to connect Panda bond.
Dr. Hassan, your voice there is some audio issue.
So is it clear now? So I'm not sure which part you were able to hear. So I'll just give my recommendations.
10 seconds.
Yeah, okay. So my recommendation again on the CPEC part, we need to link this Panda bond with one of those CPEC low-hanging projects. For me, the biggest low-hanging, because there's a strategic synergy around that, would be ML1 project because of its overall impact on the economy and perhaps the regional integration aspect of it, and of course the Belt and Road Initiative. The other area perhaps might be tourism, which the Chinese are working, especially in the GB area where we're working on sustainability aspect. So this has to work. So it cannot happen in silos. I think Iraj and his team and his leadership has to work with the leadership in planning and come to a convergent point. So this is one recommendation. The other recommendation is I would recommend that we should have lots of road shows, policy dialogues and collaborations, as we said, with the Chinese financial and roadshow. One size fit all sort of roadshows won't work. It has to be well planned, well conceived, and perhaps using the platform of the all Chinese chamber, because there are about 140 enterprises working under that chamber. At least they should try to sell these bonds to the people who have already invested in Pakistan and they understand our strength. So perhaps taking that as a stepping stone, and from them taking the advantage of connecting with them, and then their offices in Blue Area, they keep interacting and they've been nominated by the Chinese government for that. My last point would be, I think, of course, we understand this as an alternative tool. I think there should be a wider debate within the media, because in this time and age, especially in an age of misinformation and disinformation, I think the finance ministry should engage, because it's very easy to kill an initiative through media narrative in Pakistan. And I'm saying this based on my own experience of CPEC. So these are my three recommendations. Could you repeat your question again? Yeah.
So my question was what are the advantages for private investors in China to participate in Panda bonds that are issued by the developing countries like Pakistan?
Yeah, for that, I think first of all, Pakistan has to build a very good narrative, and the role of embassy will be very important, so that people understand that when they invest in such bonds, what are the returns that they are having, and therefore Pakistan has to market itself as a good investment destination. Uh, we have Dr. Khalid here and Hamid Sharif. So whether this is the right time, one of my serious recommendation is perhaps next 6 months are not good time for investing in Panda bond. I think we should look at end of 2025, where IMF has also indicated that these will be few turbulent months, and Trump 2.0 is almost all set to jitter the Chinese markets, and we must also leverage BRICS. We should work with some of the countries who are already in BRICS and looking at currency diversification. So Pakistan should look at, because it's not going to be that easy. So on the private sector side, I said, uh, work with our embassy, do good roadshows, explain why they should invest in Pakistan, and perhaps showcase Pakistan as a good investment destination. And for that, again, my point is, please use the people, the companies, and the enterprises, including SOEs, who have already invested in Pakistan, to be your ambassador for such a launch. No one would believe a person from finance department going in big speeches in English and in their own PowerPoint flowery presentation. They would rather believe a Chinese speaking on behalf of our finance department and selling it in a better way. These are my few recommendations, and on your private sector part. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your wonderful recommendations. Definitely, Pakistan needs to follow them. Now we'll come towards our next panelist, Ms. Hongyu. Ms. Hongyu, one recommendation for Pakistan, and secondly, in your opinion, what do you think that Pakistani government can play a role in incentivizing the issuance of these bonds for renewable energy development, particularly? And in terms, what regulatory support and policy incentives should be there to support these bonds for renewable energy uptake? Over to you.
Thank you. And I think a lot of comments has been addressed by the distinguished speakers before me. And I would also like to stress again about trying to utilize again, the bilateral and multilateral cooperation frameworks, such as CPEC and other regional cooperation frameworks, to promote the green and sustainable cooperation. And when we look at the Panda bond for renewable energy development in particular, we know that the energy sector in Pakistan has a lot of challenges. And I think to build confidence for the international investors or for the Chinese institutional investor, one way is to trying to provide more stable, consistent policy for the renewable energy development, both at the regulation and the planning perspective, with a more integral approach to the country's renewable energy or energy transition, including the renewable energy development. And one challenge is the grid connection as well as the storage facility. And maybe this could also be an area where the Panda bond could support in the renewable energy instead of only the renewable energy generation, so as to make the investors of the Panda bonds to be more confident about about this performance of the renewable energy dedicated Panda bond in Pakistan. So as for this is my recommendation for your question. And regarding the debt swap, I also would like to share my our thoughts. I think at this moment, maybe the focus for Pakistan is to make the first Panda bond issuance. But then, building on this experience, Pakistan could explore the debt for bond swap. So debt to nature or debt to development swap is one, which mainly involves China's foreign aid agency, which is the CIDCA, mentioned by Christoph before, together with Ministry of Finance. But a debt for bond swap is a more complicated structure, financing restructuring, and also it involves the creditor banks. So, but it helps to restructure the debt structure of the Pakistan. So this could be one in the future to consider. And as for the debt for development, it's mainly the issue for the Ministry of Finance. And from our discussion with the policy think tanks affiliated with the Ministry of Finance, their position or their view is that for debt swap on nature or on development or on climate, it mainly applies to official debt instead of commercial debt. So I think for between China and Pakistan, there are some official bilateral debt and some are commercial debt. So when we exchange with Chinese authorities on debt swap, we can prioritize the official debt first.
Yeah, Zainab, I just have one point. Can I just highlight on Sitka part?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so thus far, the role of Sitka, perhaps in Pakistan and some of the other countries, have been mostly around grant projects, especially in Pakistan under the CPEC platform and otherwise also. They've mostly focused around grant projects. So, although I agree to the role in terms of sustainability to have Sitka, but I think for me, major role in this case, and perhaps leveraging the understanding between our Ministry of Finance and MOFCOM in China, for me, this has to be three-tiered, starting from Ministry of MOFCOM in China, and NDRC also, far away as they say in Chinese. And my third institution to work closely will be Sitka in terms of highlighting some of the initiatives that work. So it cannot be just one institution that we can work on. It has to be three-tiered because for us, role of MOFCOM remains critical, not just in terms of what Iraj Hashmi Sahab is doing, also in terms of what EAD is doing in terms of debt. So within finance and EAD and planning, it has to be, from our side, has to be a very good project. And I totally endorse the point that was highlighted perhaps by Amit Sharif Saab regarding the provincial governments, because their capacity is, I mean, there's a lot to be done in terms of building their capacity and not just harnessing the environment for that, but also their debt servicing aspect is also quite weak as we speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan, for sharing these insights as well and setting the route that definitely not single organization, multiple organizations will be involved in effective implementation. With this, I'll come towards our last panelist for today, that is Mr. Iraj Hashmi. Mr. Iraj, you can give us one recommendation, or you can say a way how we can facilitate the government effective implementation of these Panda bonds in Pakistan, as Ministry of Finance will be leading this initiative, or at the end, it is always a collaborative approach to make it effective. So please let us know how we can facilitate or what recommendation you would suggest us. Yes.
So I'll be very frank with you that from the Ministry of Finance perspective, it's a learning journey for us, right? Sitting in Ministry of Finance, because this is something that the three initiatives that I've already talked about. This is a route that had never been taken before. So with every passing day, we are learning about this sustainability canvas and penetrating more into it. This Panda bond is one feature of it. This green sukuk, which is a similar sort of security, but for the domestic market, and with a separate framework, would be issued in the next month or so. So there are multiple things going on. So I would be more than happy and eager to engage with SPDI, and I mean the people who have been the part of this panel, they are more veterans and they know more about the sustainability canvas than perhaps us sitting here in Ministry of Finance, on a very honest and frank note. So perhaps a more sort of engagement, and I can assure you that in the recent time, the debt office has been engaging with the market on regular basis through CFA Society forums, through Financial Market Association forums and different forums. But perhaps all of those forums do not get at the specific need, which is the subject matter here, which is the sustainability financing, right? So perhaps SPDI, if could want to take a lead in this and want to be a contact point for us to get in touch. And it's two heads are always better than one. So we would be more than eager, and we would actually welcome that part from this PDI to actually, bring the finance minister and finance ministry closer to the people who have been there already and have already had their skin in the game in different capacities. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you, Mr. H. STPI is always very happy to assist government in every possible way, and we're always there to assist you. And we'll definitely reach out how we can assist further with
Definitely.
this.
We look forward to
And
it.
with this, yeah. So we have some questions in our chat box. Let's take a couple of questions in the interest of time. So we have this question that how Pakistan can build investor confidence to make Panda bonds a viable tool for long-term energy investments, not only for international investors, but also for local investors. Whichever panelist would like to answer this question. It's related to investors' confidence, so I would request Mr. Hamid if you can talk a little bit about this.
Sure, thank you. I think investor confidence primarily between about Panda bonds. Of course, we're looking at Chinese investors. And I think that really speaks to a number of issues which Hassan Saab highlighted. That given the security situation, given the image Pakistan has had, given the problems which Chinese investors have had in getting their repayments on the IPPs, given the issues the Chinese investors have had in repatriating their profits, these are extremely serious issues on which, the Chinese investors' view of Pakistan will be formed. And these are very, very big questions, and they go to a lot of macroeconomic policies, financial policies, which the Ministry of Finance is, of course, dealing with. And there aren't any easy answers to it. I think, but beyond anything else, it's all about sentiment. I think the sentiment in Pakistan, for reasons we all know, is extremely low. There's perceived to be a democratic deficit, which is severe, and that is getting translated into local businessmen not putting in the sort of investment you would see, and therefore expecting foreign investors to come in at this point, I think is going to be extremely difficult. So there are huge problems, I think, which Pakistan is facing, and there aren't any easy answers. Let's wait and see, because something will have to give. I don't think the status quo can continue as such.
Thank you, Mr.
Zainab, for
Hamid.
me, I
Another
just
question.
I just want to add one
Yes,
point on this.
yes, please go ahead.
For investors, I'm a person who is a proponent that investment happens in war zones also, and we have examples around us. It depends on what sectors you want to promote, that niche that Pakistan wants to work on. So I think that and trust me, for this Panda bond, the SIFC model will not work. Our ease of doing business narrative is absolutely a different ball game as far as this sort of work has to happen. So as I said, I will re-emphasize. I would request Iraj, based on my own experience, that you need to engage with the Chinese who are already investing in Pakistan. They will be your ambassadors. Otherwise, no one is going to listen to what you're going to say based on the narrative which is already existing. And you can take a case study around IPPs, and you can talk to any Chinese investor around that. It has to be long term. It has to be based on certain incentives. And at the end of the day, it will be profitability alone, nothing else. Profitability, right people to engage with, right homework done at our side. If we do that, and please don't do this in next 5 months. Just wait for another, maybe end of this year would be a better time. Right now, let Mr. Trump settle and do what he wants to do in these times. And let at least
I fully endorse what you said, Hassan, on engaging with the current investors and making them feel comfortable and getting them to be your ambassadors. I think that's something we have really missed.
I admit, I mean, on a very blunt note, I admit probably the non-deal roadshows and the deal roadshow that we have been, planning. I think that would be a very important aspect to look into, and to bring people who are already engaged with Pakistan business, community, that to take them from here to there, and propagate a softer image on that note. I think that's a very valid point. Thank you, Dr. Saab.
Thank you. So, in the interest of time, now we'll be moving towards concluding remarks for the session. And for this, I would request Dr. Khalid to lead. So, Dr. Khalid, over to you.
Thank you so much, Zainab. Zainab, this is a very difficult sort of task to conclude such a vibrant debate, and we are still in exploring process, as Erez rightly mentioned, that we need to explore and explore it in a way that is innovative, that is transformative, and that is not based on rhetoric, that we take loan, make use of these instruments, and we do not recycle this finance in a way that is productive, that has financial efficiency associated with it. So we need to sort of one thing that came into my mind listening to it is that maybe that coordination office that needs to be sort of coordinating more. It is coordinating, but still we need to think about it. What sectors we need to target, and uh, secondly, maybe that one thing that comes up with the experts' opinion. That is, we need to transform from this geostrategic model or strategic partnership sort of thing to a purely economic and competitive basis. Because CPAC, it is now converging from that G2G to B2B, business to business relationship, and that market. Believe me, that is very competitive market. And if you see it from the lens of Panda bonds are created to compete with the euro bonds, with the Western denominated bonds. So if China is competing with those, China would not compromise its integrity, its competition, its efficiency. So we need to sort of follow those principles as well. Thirdly, maybe we need to align ourselves with these financial institutions, particularly connecting Chinese as well as Pakistani financial institutions, as well as development finance banks as well, because you obviously need guarantees of these banks. So in the case of Egypt, they brought in the guarantees, and then they got this Panda bond deal. So we need to think on that as well. My friend Christoph's point is very valid, that China is thinking around it. They have developed this new implementation plan to attract high quality green finance. So they would be considering these swap options as well. Gau's point is valid, that maybe debt to bond, but that will make a good sense for Pakistan, particularly Pakistan's power sector, where we have these enormous amount of debt, and that is being transferred to the consumers, and consumers are not being able to pay the electricity bills. Industrialists, they are not able to pay electricity bill. Maybe we can swap that, and we can have this. Maybe the vicious cycle can be converted into the virtuous cycle, but still, it is a two-way game where you need to establish the the market confidence to attract more investors. Maybe you need to leverage these instruments, green instruments, with integrity, with competition, with true lateral spirit, so that more and more instruments sort of they build this conducive environment for the investors. After all, again, it is now converting from that infrastructural model to the financial architecture model, where you need to build your synergies within this landscape of financial. And Dr. Hassan is very right that politics is shaping this global financial architecture. More inward-looking policies are coming, more nationalist policies are coming. So we need to look for those as well. Maybe taking advantage of uh, Trump economics, maybe China's investments would take towards the South Asian markets, Southeast Asian markets. So maybe we need to leverage that as well. And lastly, we need to sort of recycle the finance that we get from these financial instruments, particularly Panda bonds, and how to invest that thing for a sustainable, for a more productive, more competitive sort of thing. So that would be the key. My last message would be thank you so much. Keep on engaging with STPI, and STPI will keep on bringing these innovative topics in the policy arena. And I'm very happy that AREJ has extended that Ministry of Finance would be having more consultation meetings. Definitely, STPI would be part of it, and we would be providing this. I again say this is a 3E crisis in Pakistan, and the solution to this 3E crisis is the integrated approach where finance, energy, your international relations, these instruments, they are integrated. So love to hear this discussion. Looking forward to it, and we will come up with recommendations, actionable, solution-oriented recommendations, and looking forward to our next meeting as well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. It was amazing for me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a good
Thank
day.
you.